Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is Dave Opton speaking, and wherever you're joining us from, both Harriette and I are delighted that you've taken some time from your day to spend it with us. And we're going to get into this call here in just as quickly as we can. I just want to take a moment or two here before we get going to just kind of review the bidding on the format, so particularly for those of you who are new to these calls, and so that you'll kind of know how things work. First thing you need to know is that even though we are online here, this is not a kind of a webinar in the sense that most of us are used to webinars. In other words, neither Harriette nor I have a formal presentation to make, lots of PowerPoint slides and things like that. This is essentially kind of a call-in situation, if you will, where we're here simply as resources for you to share our experiences, suggestions, or whatever on whatever topic you would like us to address that you think would be helpful to you, irrespective of what that subject matter might be. That's all we're trying to do here. So in that regard, you kind of set the agenda. And the way you do that is by simply posting your question, which you can see, I hope, pretty easily how to do that by just looking over to the right at the GoToMeeting sort of dashboard there, and you'll see an area where you can just type it in. It works pretty much like chat or instant messaging. And just go ahead and start to post those, and we will get to as many of your questions as we can during the course of the time that we have together. That's pretty much how things go. I would also say that for those, I would also wanted to add to that to not be reticent about joining in. If you're concerned at all about your confidentiality, I don't use any names or anything like that. So we'll just go through the questions and hopefully, as I said, be able to answer as many as we can for you. So that's kind of how things go. And for those of you who have not had the opportunity to review Harriette's background, let me just tell you a little bit more about her, because I'm very excited that she's been able to come back and join me. I mean, we're like a lot of companies in terms of the programming and the content that we provide. We draw upon a lot of different resources to do that. But when you've got somebody who's kind of part of your own team that helps you with that, it's even more fun and more exciting for me. And Harriette certainly is such a person and brings a lot of expertise to us today. As I said, if you'd had a chance to check out her bio, you probably already know that she is a strategist and one of our executive coaches as well, where she provides guidance and developmental coaching to enhance members' effectiveness. And she brings many, many years of experience in the areas of executive development and talent management. Indeed, over time, she has consulted with kind of a variable who's who, if you will, in the corporate world. Caterpillar, Amex, Eli Lilly, GM, Boeing, just to name a couple. So that's kind of the expertise that my guest brings with us today. And as I said, I'm very excited that she's taken time from what I know is a very busy schedule to join us on the call. Welcome, Harriette. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Dave. It's my pleasure to be here and to join you again.
Okay. Well, while people are still posting some questions, just wanted to do a couple of things. One, you and I both saw the unemployment figures that came out today for January, 257,000. For those of you who didn't see it, so that was another very good number. It really indicates that the employers have hired steadily in the last month. Workers' wages have also picked up, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And basically what the other thing that happened with this morning's report, which I think is also important, is that, and they do this every month when they do it, they go back and take a look at the figures for the prior months to see if there are any adjustments that are necessary. And there was kind of more good news that came with that, in that the job creation on the prior months was far stronger than the previously estimated. They upped their estimates in new jobs in November and December by a combined number of another 147,000. and November marked the strongest month of private sector hiring since 1997. So while it's all good news to have, there's still an awful lot of folks out there who are still, trying to work their way back from the difficult times that we certainly have all gone through. And Harriette, I know you've worked with a lot of those folks and continue to do that. So kind of inside the numbers, or what would your, any particular thoughts on how you think things kind of were going in the marketplace, say, last quarter into the early part of this year?
Certainly. I definitely think that we've seen an increase in activity, I'm going to call it, which is a lot of postings, a lot of interest, a lot of recruiters looking for potential candidates and so forth. And what we also know, of course, at the executive level, that the cycle takes longer, just in terms of making the right connections, going through the interview or selection process. So it's a very competitive job market. It's very easy to, at least the perception is, to find potentially qualified candidates, and it's becoming more and more of a challenge, I think, for our members to really tell their stories and to help themselves stand apart.
Yeah, that certainly squares with our experience as well. Thanks, Harriette. Okay, let me start with, here's a question that came in, and by the way, for those of you who might have come in a few minutes late, as kind of always happens, if you've got questions that you'd like our thoughts on, just feel free to post them, and Harriette and I will get to as many of those as we can. And Harriette, I thought I would start with this one. This person wants to know, she says, being a brand new to ExecuNet, what are the top 2 or 3 tools that either of you feel that I should be using on the website? Maybe let me start with that, Harriette. Maybe you can add some others. There are a lot of things here that you should be using, but let me at least start with, and Kim, this might not be a bad time to pop up the. I did bring a couple of extra slides here to sort of show people where it is. Certainly, first and foremost, if you have not, and this is true whether you're a brand new member or whether you have been a member for a while, either way, the center point of this is your profile. It is the first place that a recruiter is going to come. It is the first place that other members are going to come. So obviously it is in your best interest to make sure that that resume, that too, but certainly your profile here presents you in the way that you are comfortable and professional. So you need to pay attention to it. Once you log in, and if you haven't had a chance to explore the new site, you certainly should. You can see that there's a way here on that drop-down menu. There's one of the links is to manage your account, and you can see here just a couple that I've emphasized here that you're certainly free to explore them all. But one of those is your profile, and it takes you through each part of the profile, whether it's your introduction, the work experience, or whatever. And you'll find some hints there along the way in terms of what you want to make sure is there. One of which I wanted to point out because a lot of people miss it because it's sort of toward the bottom, and that is this area over here on the left, which is called More About Me. And if you can read a couple of the little statements there, what you've got here is really a series of sort of statements that you have an opportunity to react to. And I think you would appreciate that if you took the time to do that, then anybody looking at your profile and reading through this would certainly get a much deeper impression of you as a person, not just an executive who has been working X number of years in Y segment and so forth. Not an unimportant thing at all. So I'm not saying that, the world may not come to a halt if you don't take the time to do it, but it's there. It's an opportunity for you to share your value system and other things with other folks. And again, be they a recruiter or another member. So that would certainly be the first thing that if you haven't gotten to it or haven't had a chance to edit your profile recently, I would certainly urge you to do. Number 2, I think, would be in the upper right here on managing your accounts. You see an area there in terms of managing your resume, because you certainly are going to want to have a resume up here as well. If you haven't, you should put one up. If you haven't taken advantage, because one of the things that comes with your membership, whether you're a basic member with us or whether you are a platinum member, you have the opportunity to have your resume reviewed. It's a complimentary review, but I would tell you that the value of that review is not that it's complimentary or free. You can do that 1,000 times anywhere on the internet. The value of that review is that you are going to get somebody's honest opinion of what's there. And I certainly would hope and expect that if you've taken advantage of that, you know that it was worthwhile and that there was value delivered in terms of the feedback that you received. So if you haven't had a chance to do it, that is certainly something that I would urge you to do as well. Thirdly, well, I don't know. There's an awful lot. One, and if you haven't set up a job alert, you certainly are going to want to do that, simply because you know, jobs are posted. Although a mistake that some people fall into is they set up a job alert and they think that that's pretty much it, and they kind of sit back and wait for the phone to ring. We post jobs here for sure. Every job that comes here comes directly from the recruiting source, but you need to understand that at the levels that we operate here, while some people certainly end up making a change because of answering an ad, it's a very, very low percentage when you're dealing with executive level employment. By far and away, networking is the more effective route to go. 70% of the membership here, when they make a change, tell us that it was through some kind of a linkage process. So, but I certainly would set up the alert, and the reason it's that way, so it's automatic, so you don't have to invest a lot of time and energy. If something comes across the network, you certainly would get notified about it. Let me just sort of pause there. Harriette, you may have some other suggestions.
My other suggestion would be, and Kim, if we could go back to the home page, please, slide, would certainly be to think about where you are in your career. And I really appreciate the sort of the two central places, the career center, obviously for those in search mode or
right.
thinking about it or transition mode, and the other is leadership exchange for those really to improve upon themselves to be the best leaders they can be. So those are the two main entry points, and behind those is just a wealth of information presented in various ways, whether they be webinars or blogs or other documents to access. Some of the greatest thought leaders and experienced kinds of individuals, and that kind of information is there. And I would just remind you that if you have not, the contact number that's there at the top left and certainly on your home screen is to take advantage of a tour with one of our member services individuals. I've recently done so. I call them even when I have questions, so I highly recommend that.
Yep. Okay, great. And let's move on here. Here's a question, Harriette, came in for you. It says, once a candidate has been introduced to a hiring manager, whether through networking or through a recruiter, what do hiring managers typically want to see as a resume tool? Are they open to non-traditional style resumes, or do they still want to see a traditional style? That's
right.
Yeah.
You know, that's an interesting question because without knowing the specific company, the culture, and so on, I would say it depends upon the individual. I would suggest that doing your due diligence and getting to know a little bit about the individual, about the company and its culture might be kind of a way to begin. And it's probably not an or, it could be an and.
Yep.
You may have a more traditional yet contemporary resume that certainly emphasizes the value that you bring, a bit about who you are, and obviously what you know and what you've done, so the more traditional lines. But you might consider bringing in something that is a little bit more contemporary, forward-thinking, perhaps adding graphics or thinking about another way to present yourself that could be that leave behind to provide an impact and also to continue to separate yourself out from other candidates. Dave, anything to add?
Well, I guess I would say it on a macro level, because this is something that comes up a lot in terms of resumes. I think it's important for us all to remember that the resumes, what they should look like, their format, should they be, you know, the more traditional two-page chronological, or say the kind of things that John Lucht promotes, where his story is, you know, it doesn't make any difference if it's 8 or 9 pages. It's what's in there is important. The point is that you're dealing with a very subjective world here. Obviously, if there was one, you know, universal correct way to do it, they'd all look that way. They don't. So I think Harriette's advice is very sound, and that is, if you have the opportunity to do some research where you get a sense and feel of the culture, or better yet, as much information as you can in terms of who it is you're going to be meeting with, that may help you decide what kind of a resume format you're going to present to them. You'll notice, for example, on our site, you can upload three different resumes if you choose, and there's some people who actually do have that. Sometimes because they want to take into account, you know, something more traditional versus something that might be a little more today, if you will. Or we have an awful lot of people in this network with very broad-based backgrounds, so they may have a resume that focuses on their, you know, marketing strengths, and another one maybe that might be more focused on general management. So at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you need to make a judgment and go with what you think makes sense. Bottom line, irrespective of any of that, I think it is really important, because I talk to members all the time who say, well, gee whiz, I've shown my resume to, you know, 10 people, and I've got 10 different opinions, and I don't know what to do. I don't know whether to make it longer, shorter, or whatever. And I said that is exactly my point. That's why, at the end of the day, you've got to use what you are comfortable with, what you think represents you, the way you should be represented, and go with that. That may be more commentary than necessary, but at the end of the day, that's really what you've got to do. Okay, let's see here. Is there any way to network with leading executive recruiters inside of ExecuNet? If so, how do I do that? Recruiters, in many cases, unless you know them personally, aren't really interested in doing a lot of networking. The recruiters who use ExecuNet, and there are thousands of them, much prefer to go into a database, and that's why I was emphasizing your profile and your resumes, and then decide who they want to reach out to. One of the traps that a lot of people fall into is they feel that, well, okay, I'm going to use recruiters as a major leverage point in my search, thinking that somehow the recruiters are going to be your quote friend in this process. If you know somebody, that's great. If you don't, I wouldn't invest a lot of time and energy trying to network my way into recruiters. We have a number of programs, by the way, that given by executive recruiters that certainly talk about how you can do some networking in that community, and how to kind of manage your search in that world. If you haven't had a chance to check out some of those, I certainly would do that as well. Harriette, you have any thoughts on that?
I would just add that, like any networking relationship, the relationship is reciprocal. And recruiters are also open when you can help them as well. So when you think about your profile, going back to that for a moment, a number of us will say on our profiles that we're willing to provide, you know, information and recommend people for jobs and those sorts of things. And so that certainly helps. But there's no doubt that a direct introduction, even to a recruiter, will get you a lot farther. And Pat Romaletti, one of our colleagues here at ExecuNet, has said in the past that she would rather have one referred resume and recommendation by someone she knows than to have to sort through, let's say, a stack of 100 potential candidates. So that same principle applies in terms of being referred and being introduced.
Fair enough. Let's see. This person wants to know how accepted are video is a video presentation on the executive levels these days. Harriette, you have any thoughts on that?
I would say it depends on the video. Having just seen one recently. In all seriousness, that's a very contemporary, forward-thinking sort of thing. And I'm thinking of a member who I had a conversation with, and it was just too much information. He had one of those, you know, multi-page sorts of resumes, a very lengthy LinkedIn profile with a lot of attachments and such, and a website which included a video and so forth. At the end of the day, very few individuals, particularly with executive candidates, are going to take the time to go through all of that information. Yeah. So we're back to, I think, stepping back for a moment, thinking about what's your core message? What is your branding and positioning? What value can you bring? And getting down to the details of that sort of thing, obviously along with some of your credentials and education and so on, that's what's most important. So if that can be presented clearly and concisely, perhaps by video, go for it. But I would say less is more.
Yeah, I would certainly would agree with that. This person's question is, could you describe some of the best practices that ExecuNet members use to network with other ExecuNet members? Well, first and foremost, I mean, there are a couple different ways. Obviously, you can network both online and off. If you're not aware of it, we run a number of networking meetings. These are face-to-face meetings around the country. When you log in, you can kind of see the upcoming ones if you look down the right-hand side once you've logged in. And if you have a meeting in your area and you haven't had a chance to go yet, I certainly would suggest that you have the opportunity to do that. It obviously will give you an opportunity to meet some people that you probably haven't met before, which is really a very, very good thing. I will tell you, remember I mentioned earlier in the call that about 70%, a little bit more than that actually, of our members who end up making a change tell us when they look back upon the chain of events that led to wherever it is they made the change to, they come back and tell us that it started with someone they didn't know at the beginning. And so that's one of the reasons that we have the meetings, is to give people an opportunity, one more venue in addition to hopefully those things that people are doing anyway, to expand their personal and professional network. So that's certainly one way to do it. Another, Kim, if you could go back for a moment to the account management page that shows how the site is broken up. If you'll also look over, you'll see down in the kind of right-hand corner there where it says network. Once you go in, you'll see there's a link there to member search. We have a search engine there that works not terribly dissimilar to LinkedIn, where you can slice and dice in a number of different ways and take a look at the profiles of other members. And if you choose to, you can reach out to them directly. You don't have to go through anybody, but simply introduce yourself. You're both members of ExecuNet. If they've filled out their profiles in a nice, thorough fashion, you'll be able to see what their preferences are, meaning networking preferences, and what they're willing to help with or what they might be have some knowledge about, which also is not a bad sort of icebreaker way. to reach out, and hopefully you can begin a begin a dialogue. You can even do a search on zip codes, and you may very well be able to find people who are close enough to you so that you might reach out and maybe have a cup of coffee, or who knows what. So those are certainly a couple of ways to get involved, so to speak. I don't know, Harriette, if you had any other thoughts.
No, not really. I think that those are excellent suggestions.
Okay. All right, let's see here. Says, how many recruiters do you have in your network, and how does ExecuNet attract recruiters to work with your company as opposed to other sites like the Ladders or others? Well, let me answer that question this way. The answer is thousands. We've been around since 1988, so we've been here for 27 years. The recruiters actually who work with us are members, just like the executives are. They come to us actually pretty much the way the executives do, by referral, most of them, from current members or former members. And the reason they come to us and keep coming to us, because recruiters, as you probably know, are not necessarily noted for their loyalty. They work with organizations where they get results. And the fact that we focus on a very narrow segment of the marketplace, that is to say C-level executives and their direct reports, the reason they keep coming back here is not because of quantity. They come back here because of quality. I have often talked to members over the year, or to members and recruiters in particular over the years, and say to them, when you're looking for candidates, obviously I have no idea who ends up getting interviews, and of the people who get interviews, who gets an offer and who accepts. That's part of the interviewing process. But what I do firmly believe is that if you utilize this network to try to identify, or in your identification process, I would be very surprised if you came back to tell me that you were not extremely impressed with the quality of what you see. And the fact that we're here 27 years later would suggest that that is still the case. So if I had to sum it up in one word, how do I get them to work with us? The answer is by reputation. Let's see here. This person says, when I'm going back to a company for a second and third job interviews, and these interviews are going to be with different people, do either of you think I should change up my questions and or my examples of past successes? Harriette, I've got to believe that you've talked with many clients faced with that kind of a challenge. What do you tell them?
I have, and I've also been on the selection system interviewing side of this question too. There's a couple of things. Number one, you need to, again, think of who is it that you're interviewing with, and who would be the best person to answer certain questions that you may have. So, for instance, obviously, if you're interviewing with HR and you have questions around benefits and so on, that's the so-called expert. So that's number one. Secondarily, you can basically think about certain examples that you may share, but you might choose to emphasize a different part of that same story depending upon your audience. So, for instance, if we're talking about, let's say, a reorganization or a restructuring that you may have led, if you're speaking again with the HR person, of course you'll want to emphasize the people aspect of that. What did you do to communicate the change, to keep individuals engaged, to perhaps deal with concerns or pushback that you may have received? If you're talking with an operations person, it would certainly be more strategic in nature. What got reorganized? What were the results or the benefits from that restructuring, that perhaps the customer engagement levels and percentages? If you're speaking with someone from finance, obviously you'll want to concentrate on the metrics. So the benefit of using a similar example but taking it from a different perspective is when those interviewers have their conversation about you, which I would call data integration, and they can each speak to a particular example from their perspective, it creates sort of a better picture of the candidate. That being said, you'll also want to have a couple of backup stories or unique stories, again, that may resonate with that particular interviewer. So the bottom line is preparation. Obviously, they're going to ask questions based upon your resume. Don't assume that prior interviewers have communicated with each other to any extent. And secondarily, consider your target audience that you're speaking to.
Well said. Thanks, Harriette. We do have someone on the call who's been a long-time member here and just posted a comment apropos to the question that came up on ladders and how recruiters work here and so forth. And what she said was, she says, in comparing ExecuNet to other sites, such as LinkedIn or ladders, I often tell people that ExecuNet provides a warm environment between members and staff. It's quality, quality, quality. I've experienced everything from very helpful members as well as taking a job from an ExecuNet posting. Thanks for the comment. Appreciate that. Let's see here. This is kind of a follow-on, Harriette, to the subject we were just discussing. This person says, do you have ideas on how to contact a person or company where I had a good interview that I had a good interview with last year, but the timing wasn't right? Now that I'm seriously looking due to a downsizing action, do you have any suggestions on how I could best renew the discussion?
I would suggest that depending upon, who you interviewed with, assuming you have that contact information, is to go directly back to that individual. It does help if you do a bit of due diligence prior to that, whatever information you can find out about their current business challenges or opportunities that they may have, and again, describe how you might add value and therefore you'd be interested in having a conversation or continuing our conversation. That would be the way to approach it. But I definitely would be proactive in writing, preferably one of the key decision makers versus very broadly human resources or some such thing.
Yeah, I would totally agree. This person wants to know, where do we find recruiters? Where do we find the recruiters list and their focus areas? There are a number of different sources that you can use. If you've got a library near you, you can just ask the librarian if they have a copy of a directory called the Directory of Executive Recruiters, which is published by Kennedy Information. There's Hunt Scanlon. What are they called? I think they're HSZ Publications also, I think, has a directory. There are a number of them, and they list the firms and the names and so forth. In fact, the Kennedy directory, they have a secondary product that they used to call Search Select. They may have changed the name, but basically it's an electronic version of the directory so that you can kind of cut and paste and use it to send mailings in that regard. And a lot of firms, they will talk about their areas of focus. Whether that how true that is for some of them, you don't know, but at least it's there. And the other thing, of course, you can do is go online and look. Just a simple search like Executive Recruiters or something. Most of them have websites, and on their websites they talk about kind of areas of specialty if they happen to have one. But again, I would go back and say, if you're going to do a mailing to recruiters, that's fine. Certainly, people end up with jobs because recruiters find them in some way, shape, manner, or form. But again, remember, make sure that the time that you're using is in proportion to the ROI. networking is by far and away, and I mean the other things are not even close. A good recruiter might work on 10 assignments a year, 12 if they're super well terrific. So you can, and believe you me, when they are doing a search, they are focused on doing that search. And unless you are meet that criteria of what they're looking for to not just one decimal place but several, their interest in is not going to be very high at all. Again, I would, if you, we've got a couple of really good programs. One is by one of the other career strategists, Pat Romboletti. There's another by Tony Palmer. There are two that come to my mind. Both of which are available to you as part of your membership. They've been recorded, and they talk to that subject as well. So if you need help finding, give member services a call. But certainly you can check that out. Harriette, here's a question, and this sort of thing comes up with some frequency as well. This person says, how can you interest a recruiter if you've always been an owner of a business yourself and you're more than 50 years old? How can I do this so as not to scare them, since they probably come into it with a perception that I'm not going to follow orders? A lot of people, particularly in the environment that we're coming out of, are in this situation and worry about such things, not just from an age perspective, but also the fact that they've been, running their own show for a while, and I want to move back onto the other side. Harry, your thoughts?
Well, I definitely would say, and it goes back to kind of that theme, Dave, of an over-reliance on executive recruiters. I mean, certainly the how to attract and engage recruiters link that I see that Kim posted is very helpful, and there's some definite helpful hints there. Because of the population of our membership, the 50-plus question comes up in a number of different ways. And I think that you may have definitely more challenge by presenting your value and yourself to a recruiter versus passing that along to the key decision makers, be they investors, other C-level executives, and so on. Because at the end of the day, it's really the business conversation that you need to have. It's where's the alignment? What are the needs of that particular organization, their challenges, their opportunities, et cetera? What are your particular needs of where you want to land? And how can you add value? Where's that intersection? Where's the alignment? And that's typically not the level of conversation that one has with a recruiter. And so we're back to, that 70% that tell us they rely upon their network, they rely upon referrals and direct introductions versus working through other kinds of channels.
Fair enough. Thanks, Harriette. I guess what I would add to that, or my take on it, would go something like this. The potential objections that you've identified here are certainly the right ones, and the ones which you're going to have to develop a nice, well-rehearsed answers to going forward. If you look at what you're trying to do, this is essentially, and this is true of anybody who's looking to make a change, this is essentially a sales process. And as such, you need to anticipate and have ready responses to the customer's potential objections to buying what you're selling. And the best way I know of, rather than to wait for them to raise the objections, and when it comes to things like age, for example, they're probably not going to do that, even though they're thinking it, is to bring them up yourself in a way that allows them to see that you are not the threat that they might be concerned about. So in short, you've got to develop a story that shows people that while you've enjoyed your past experiences and certainly succeeded on your own, you're at a different stage now in your life. You're more interested and motivated to bring your experience to an enterprise without carrying the extra burden of being the owner, or things that focuses on something like that. But as as Harriette said, that's part of the business conversation, and as long as you think about it in that sense and think about yourself as a buyer and understand what the potential objections that you would have, then as a good salesperson, you need to develop tactics to address and alleviate the concerns that you know that are there. You know, easier said than done, but the fact of the matter is that's the way you need to do it. Let's see. Could either of you share your thoughts on the perception of taking a position with a lower level of responsibilities than the one you previously held versus staying in transition until that ideal role came along? Taking a step back to get into an organization that is of interest to you. This comes up a lot as well, particularly given the economic environment that we're continually we're getting better, but coming out of. Harriette, what would your thoughts be for someone facing this situation?
Well, I think it's certainly far more acceptable in today's world than it used to be, where one thought that if you weren't climbing the career ladder by going up the ladder only, that you were not being successful. The reality is sometimes you go up, sometimes you come down, sometimes you go to a different ladder or even sideways. So I think it's far more acceptable. The issue again becomes, from a personal perspective, do you really feel that you can contribute to an organization? Would you be satisfied making that kind of contribution, and what are the agreements that you've worked out with that organization in terms of future potential and that sort of thing? The other is, of course, if you're in the interview process, I find that's a really tough objection to overcome. The assumption is often made that you're only going to be there until you are offered something better and then you're going to leave. So you really need to kind of search yourself to see whether, in fact, that's a fit. Some individuals choose to make that move. They don't want the scope of responsibility, or they want to focus in on, you know, something very special and narrower than the past. So again, it's really thinking and soul-searching. Can I make this work? Why am I taking this? What's my motivation? And how can I sincerely contribute to this organization?
Yeah, it's obviously you know, a real dilemma, and one that gets you know, creates even more pressure when the obvious other factor that comes into making that kind of a decision is financial. Forget about the fact that, you know, you may have to talk somebody into it because they're going to say, well, gee whiz, I don't want Dave. You know, Dave, why would you want to do this? You obviously are qualified to do something more than this, and I'm really not sure we're going to hire somebody who we think might leave as soon as things get better, and so forth and so on. But there's always this, it's the financial thing comes into play, and obviously that's an individual thing that each one of us has to you know, has to deal with.
I will add to that, Dave, that sometimes I've had executives that I've worked with who have been successful in negotiating an interim role or perhaps a consulting kind of agreement with defined outcomes of what they need to accomplish within a certain time frame. So it does a couple of things. One, it takes some of the pressure off financially if that's a concern. The other, though, is it's a way for you to test that organization and vice versa. And in a couple of those instances that I'm thinking of in my mind, they have resulted in full-time positions that didn't even exist before they did that special project or that focused kind of time frame. Yeah, actually, I've had a lot of, haven't done it myself, but I know a lot of people who have, and you make a very, very good point. One of which is if you can get a consulting gig like that or a temporary thing like that, it does serve the purpose that Harriette just described, and don't underestimate the advantage of being able to test drive an environment with no strings attached. And that works both ways. And I've seen stats over the years that have said that as much as 40% of the time, someone who gets into that kind of a situation ends up being offered a permanent job. So it certainly is is something to be considered and considered seriously. Let's see. What are your top suggestions for maximizing the executive career search when you are 50 plus?
Well, the average age in our network is 53. So, and those of you who have been on these calls with me before know that we are no strangers to the whole world of over 50 and age discrimination and all of the other kinds of things that go with that. So, and we certainly have plenty of content that that focuses on that particular area. I would say if I had to pick one, and don't shoot me for saying, well, Dave, you're just a big Pollyanna. I don't mean it in that way. But one of my top suggestions would be is to get over it. Stop thinking about the fact that you're 55 or 60 or well over 70 as I am, that this is a showstopper. Is it going to take you longer to get a job? Probably, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. So I would say make sure that you've got an attitude that you've worked very, very hard at becoming the success that you have, and you bring an awful lot to the party. In fact, you bring a heck of a lot more than somebody who's half your age would bring. And that is not something that somebody, that can be replaced in that regard. Secondarily, I think I would, from a practical perspective, I know a lot of folks who come out of particularly Fortune 500 organizations and are in their 50s or 60s, and they've been there for a long time, so their idea is, well, I'll just go back to another, similar kind of sized organization. That is probably not going to happen. I would focus my time and my energy on smaller organizations, particularly because the value that you bring with the experience that you have is really going to mean a heck of a lot more to them than they are a larger organization. And thirdly, I would again, it's another thing where the networking part of this is so terribly, terribly important in terms of the research that you do to identify the organizations where the experience that you bring will have significant impact on them. But I would start with attitude, because people can see it, they can sense it, and so it's important that you've got your head screwed on right. Harriette?
What I would add to that, and it really builds on it quite well, and that is you need to make certain that you are presenting yourself in a future-focused, contemporary kind of fashion. And what I mean by that is, don't begin your resume with over 30 years of experience.
Yeah.
Watch out when you have an AOL email address, which sort of dictates, old to some folks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those kind of subtleties that are seasoned. I mean, there's so many things that are very, very subtle, but certainly can get in your way. You become your own worst enemy. On our website, the career side, if you will, managing your job search, there is a tab entitled Age Bias.
Right.
So there's wonderful blogs and those kinds of things there as well. But certainly it's, a whole kind of strategic effort to help you leverage the benefits of your experience and so on that, quite frankly, you couldn't have if you weren't 50 plus.
Yep, absolutely true. And in fact, the age bias area subcategory that Harriette just mentioned, that's one of the reasons it's there as a subcategory, because this is an issue that that comes up, as I said, very, very, very frequently for sure. This caller wants to know, are there any particular gotchas that to keep in mind when considering a temp to perm contract? Harriette, any particular red flags there that people should keep an eye out for?
Well, I do just think that you do need to have some sort of agreement or contract in place, and that you need to have clearly defined outcomes in terms of what's expected and so forth, and to make sure that there's a definite time frame involved, because you don't want to be giving away your expertise and so on without being compensated and without some boundaries being set forth, but for both you and the employer. So while there's no guarantee on the company side, you also need to make certain in terms of what deliverables you're providing and so on, and what will happen at the conclusion of that arrangement.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that, because I have talked to some members over time. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen, particularly, by the way, if you are considering, doing some consulting, while you're looking or something like that. It probably happens more often in that situation than if you're considering a temp assignment. But particularly if you're going down that road, is to make sure that, as Harriette says, that things are spelled out and it's very it's clear, because I've heard of a number of situations sometimes where companies will try to take advantage of the individual and, in a sense, kind of get something for nothing. Maybe saying, well, why don't you come in here, put together a 90-day plan on how you would approach this particular thing. And they put in a heck of a lot of work on that, and they come in and the company says, thank you very much, and they'll give it to somebody internally to do or something like that. So you've got to be careful not to give it away, but make sure that you stick to your guns in the sense of time is money, as they say. And that would be the only thing I think I would add to that, in terms of just make sure that you don't get the feeling that they're going to do something like that. Follow-on question. I have always been in consulting. What are the best tactics to be attractive for an internal leadership role? I think it's not a lot different than if you were working there full time. Internal people become candidates for promotions and other things when they've built a reputation, when they're visible, when people believe they are valued members of a team and make contributions to it. And I don't think it's any different from any different, if you will, than if I was a full-time employee. It's we often use a phrase around here called the name of the game is to be remembered and to be referred. And most of us are remembered sometimes for the right reasons and sometimes for the wrong reasons. But if you're looking for a leadership position, you want to be one of those who are remembered, and and be able to demonstrate the quality of what you bring. Okay, let's see here. Another resume question. What are your recommended steps to preclude one's resume from being shelved due to age? Is omission of dates on the resume a likely age concern giveaway? Is part of the solution to avoid this, to limit past experience to 4 to 5 companies or some other number? If the latter is recommended, will omitting the dates regarding when I achieved my undergraduate or graduate degree likely trigger the same red flag to the recruiter? Well, Harriette has kind of already alluded to this, and again, this comes into this. We talked a little earlier in the call about the resume world being a subjective area, and ask 10 people what they think about this question, and you're very likely to get, half of them will say, don't put anything down like that, and so forth, and others will say, no, you're just, it's a red flag either way, and so it really doesn't make any difference. So it doesn't mean that there's a right or a wrong answer. Again, it kind of, I think, rests with the individual and how they feel they're going to approach the marketplace. Because quite frankly, if that resume is getting into the hands of an organization that is going to put a heavy emphasis on what age they want that person to be coming into that job, they're going to be able to figure it out either way, and they're probably just going to go ahead and do that. At least that's my personal opinion. So I tend to come down on the side of you don't necessarily have to put it up there in fireworks, but I certainly not sure that it makes a hell of a lot of difference, trying to hide that stuff. Harriette?
I would just add that a resume is not an application. And so it isn't necessary to have all of the details. It's really, again, thinking of where you want to land. What is the best way to market and position yourself? It's that future-oriented message. And as you begin to frame your career history or your story, if you will, it's the most relevant positions that will contribute to the credibility for where you want to land. So sometimes that means going a bit further back in one's career history. Sometimes it means summarizing early career history. Sometimes it means leaving it off. It just depends. In terms of years of graduation, again, at the executive level, what's most important is that you have the credentials, the degrees. When you graduated, what your GPA was, and so on, in most organizations is not relevant at the executive level. There are those that have the philosophy that they ask that of all candidates, which is a different discussion. That's an exception. But your aim is to get in the door and to get to the next step. And so I would say that you need to do whatever is comfortable for you and what you think would give you the greatest opportunity to get in the door. And to Dave's point, you will get so many different opinions on this, but our experience shows that the best aim is to think about your go-to-market strategy, what will work best for you.
Yeah, I would say amen to that. And again, as long as we're sort of focused on this age thing, this is again why the networking piece of this is so very, very important. Because when you have the opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody, I don't necessarily mean about a job. I'm just talking just where you begin to build a relationship or talk to someone, as Harriette has alluded to earlier in the call, and you're really talking about business situations. They aren't worried at that point of how old you are or when you graduated or anything else. There's an exchange of ideas that comes across to people to say, this person has knowledge here. This person, and particularly if you've done the research so that you understand where their pain points are. The good news about being over 50, by the way, is that you have probably addressed that problem, and probably more than once. And that is not going to be lost on somebody when you have the opportunity to talk to them. And they aren't focused on, well, let's see when this person graduated. If they start to see you as the aspirin to their headache, they could care less when you graduated. Anyway, well, we've kind of run out of time here, Harriette, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions, but we did get to as many as we could. But before we kind of close up here, based on kind of what you've heard today, or anything else you'd like to share with the group before we have to close up?
I guess I would go back to my executive assessment days, and we used to talk about the concept of a three-legged stool. And the advice that I would give, whether we're speaking about a resume or a conversation or anything else, is to consider these three things about yourself. Definitely what you know is one of the legs of that stool. Your experience, your knowledge, your education, your certifications, etc. Secondarily, of course, is what you've done. So again, it's the experiences, the results, typically the more traditional kind of information, career history that you would see on a resume. And lastly, who you are. And that's where you have, I think, the greatest opportunity to leverage both your personal values and approach to things and your unique differentiators. And that, at the end of the day, best determines fit, and I think is a way to open doors.
Well said. Well said. Harriette, thanks again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I wanted to thank Kim Keeley, who's been back there in the background making sure we don't blow ourselves up, and certainly to the members who joined us on the call today, and would certainly look forward to you joining us on other calls down the road. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everyone.